What's going on, everybody? James here from Artificial Entertainment, and welcome to another episode in the Dynamic Parkour Choice System Full Setup series. And in this one, we're going to be focusing on setting up the gap actions. So let's go ahead and dive in. Alright, so we're back here in the project that we've been working in throughout this series, and we've got a few things set up now. We've got some mantle and vault type actions. We can, vertical wall climb up to a ledge, attach to a ledge from air, and slide and dive through things, and we got a bunch of things set up now. So the next step is to be able to make it so that way when our character reaches a ledge or something like this, a drop off of some kind, that we can now perform various actions based off of the conditions of that drop off. So we're going to talk about a few different things, but ultimately by the time we're done here, we'll have the ability to jump across, drop down to a ledge, drop down to falling, and, have some cool different stuff that we can do from this type of ledge here. And the first action that we're going to set up is the jump across. So if I go into the character blueprint here, for me is just BP third person character, and we're going to go to the interfaces section, action events, and we're going to pull out the gap action event here. Now let's take it, pull it off to the side of our graph, and then we'll grab the mesh and the play montage node like we've always done, and then just Control D to duplicate it, hook up the execution pins, and then off the montage to play, we're just going to get a select node, just like that. Hook up the enum here into the index, and there we go. Now we have the montage play section for our gap actions. So we're just going to compile, save, and now I'm going to show you guys a few things about the gap actions behavior and how to be able to set things up just on like a base level. We're going to be going in more detail with other videos and stuff. I'm just, we're trying to just go through getting things operational for, with some modification in mind. So I'm going to go into the primary system settings, initial area trace options, and I'm going to turn the draw debug type to for duration. Now I'm also going to go to the gap action types and the gap trace settings, up cross, trace settings, and turn the draw debug type on this to for duration as well. Now if we compile and save, and we go and we hit play, so I'll just do play from here on top of the kind of structure here. Now if I go ahead and hit the spacebar, you can see that there's a trace that runs to be able to find the platform on the other side. So there's, a nice way to be able to tell, okay, hey, yeah, we got a platform here. Awesome. Now if I go ahead and we're going to disable the action types here. So I'm going to go under the miscellaneous overrides and override the motion warp and action output settings. We're going to set that to true. And then under the gap actions, under the ground action settings, allowed gap actions, we're going to set jump across to true. So this way we're allowing the jump across action to be allowed. However, we're stopping it because we're actually overriding the montage selection itself. And the reason why we're doing this is this way I can show you guys the way the debug spheres are going to work. So if I go ahead and hit the spacebar here, you can see that the red sphere is there on the ledge in front of us, which is warp 4. The yellow sphere is on the ledge on the opposite side, which is the height, which is warp 1. The green sphere right there is a little in front of the warp 1 sphere, which is the landing location. And then we have that blue sphere on the opposite side telling us, hey, this is where this platform area ends. So for something like a jump across type action, what we would do is we would want to use warp 4 as like our starting point for our jump, and then warp 3 for our landing point for our jump. So now that we have that identified, what we can do is go ahead and we'll just turn those traces off really quickly. So I'm going to go into the gap action distance settings, gap up and across, trace settings, and we're going to turn the for duration instead to none. And then we're going to go up to the primary settings as well, trace options under the initial area trace options, and turn this to none as well. So we'll compile and save. So now let's go ahead and grab our animation and get it set up to be able to be used in the system. So I'm going to go into my animations folder here, and I have all the ones that we're going to be using in today's example right here. And these are just animations assigned to the skeleton I'm using, and they do have a root motion. So that's really all it is, and as long as you have, retargetate or something, you're all set. So my jump across montage, or action I should say, is split up into two different animations here, similar to my slide. So if I look at the jump start, we have this, and then I also have the jump finish here as well. So we're going to take both of these and combine them into one animation. So we're going to go right click, animation, animation montage, select my retarget skeleton here, and we're going to call this jump across. And then we'll double click to open it up. Now we'll leave it kind of small for right now, so this way we can take our jump start, drag it in here, and then the jump finish and drag it in here. This way we have the full sequence. Just like that. Now, as per the usual, we're just going to go ahead into notifies, add a new notify track. This way we have 2 of them. And we're going to take a look at the notify state, motion warping, put the first node at the beginning, and we're going to look at where he kind of does his jump, like where he kind of gets into position. So we'll say right about there. And because we know that the ledge point, the closest point in front of the character, is warp 4, we're going to go ahead and set this to warp 4. Now, what we're going to do from here is look at right about where he does his jump. So we'll say right about here is a good spot, I think. And then we're just going to right-click again, add notify state, motion warping. I'm just going to line up with the start there, and we're going to look at where he gets to the end for his land. So we'll say right about there seems like a good spot. And then we're going to right-click one more time, add notify, and reset parkour action. Now, because we are entering into like a landing, like a full feet on the floor type of situation, we also want to make sure that with the reset parkour notify selected, we go up into the details panel, set the movement mode from falling to walking. Now, if we go ahead and click on save, we need to make sure to define the motion warp window. So on the big one here that we made in the middle, we're going to go to the root motion modifier, and we're going to set this to warp 3. Make sure to uncheck ignore z-axes, which I don't think I did on this one. I did not. So go ahead and uncheck that. You can keep the warp rotation on. If you do find that your animation has any issues, like when you land and exit back into your actual locomotion state, if you notice any weird rotation issues on that transition from the montage into your animation, you can uncheck warp rotation, so this way it'll just try to use whatever the default is. But realistically, I haven't found too many issues that with these types of actions having warp rotation checked. And there is a rotation that's always being fed in. So now if we go ahead and just click save, and we go back to our character, but first we'll just click on the little folder here, so this way we can have this, highlighted in our content browser there, just like that. And go back to our character, and we'll pop this bad boy into our jump across option here. So now if I go ahead and on the jump across, if I make sure that that's true, and then I go ahead and scroll down here and turn off the override, and then compile, save, and go ahead and just, we'll play from right here. And if I press the space bar, you can see that now he jumps across. So we got that nice, goes all the way from point A to point B, and good to go. Now, as you saw there, he didn't do an action type, he instead actually just did a normal jump. And that actually brings me to the next point, is that gap actions have a few different options that can help you define how actions are going to actually be taken. So the first thing I want to show you is the distance to edge to perform an action. So right now I have it set to 150. So if I'm within 150 units of the ledge, which basically means if I'm within a square and a half, I'll be able to perform an action. So if I go ahead and I hit play, and if I know I'm within, let's say right about here, and if I hit space, you can see he does the action. However, if I'm more than, let's say right about here, you can see that he does not. But if I just take a couple steps forward, then boom, he does the action. And the reason why I know what the distance is because one of these squares is 1 meter inside of Unreal Engine's unit system, and 1 meter equals 100 units. So if I know if I have this set to 150, then it's, that's exactly it. Now, you can set this to a smaller value, let's say to 50, and then you have to be basically right on the ledge in order for that to happen. You can also set it to a higher value if you want to control that, so it's entirely up to you. But it's just something to keep in mind that you can use this to control when a jump is going to take place instead of an action because they're not close enough to the ledge. Now, we also have the max jump across distance here, which is going to control what distance that this can happen from. So like the maximum distance here looks like about 4 meters. Now, because of the offset that's happening from the trace start position, 4 meters is still going to be an allowed distance, as you can see. However, if I set this from 350 to instead, let's say 300, and I hit compile, save, and I play from here. And if I try to jump across here, you can see that it no longer wants to jump across. So that 50 unit difference can sometimes be the adjustment needed because it's being pushed forward by forward direction offset 50 units. So whatever you set this by, you just want to make sure that that's adjusted for your jump across distance if you're trying to keep within proper metrics. Now, the other element about the gap actions that I really do recommend keeping in mind is something to do with the trace system itself. So we're going to go, just going to really quickly just grab this and we're just going to duplicate it and put it like something like right here. Now, if I go ahead and I play from here on top of this sphere here, now you might not want gap actions to be taken from objects of this height. This might be a little too low to the ground for the type of gameplay you're trying to create. However, you can see here that this will create the actual jump to be able to get to. and that can sometimes be problematic. Don't mind this object, it has weird collision. But to be able to make it so that way this type of situation does not happen, what you can do is we're going to go ahead and just take a look quickly at the under let's see, primary settings, initial area trace options. We're going to turn the debug type to for duration, and we're also going to go ahead and turn the override back on really quickly. So we'll compile, save, and then we'll play on top of this object here. So if I go ahead and I just press the spacebar, you're going to see that there's a trace that runs forward, but the last trace there does not hit. It just kind of goes and, doesn't find anything. That is the ultimate trace letting the system know that, okay, we didn't find anything, there's a gap. And that is ultimately controlled under the gap action settings. So if we go to the gap action settings, gap trace settings, and we look at the up/across, you're going to see trace Z length. If we set this to something like 200, and then we play again, and if I go up to any of the edges here, and if I press the spacebar, you can see that now it continues to run. But the one thing that's important to note is that if I show the across trace here, so if I set the draw debug type to for duration, no, I didn't want to hit play. I wanted to do a play from here. If I hit the spacebar, you can see that the actual trace looking for a platform no longer runs. So it's important to note that this value here, the trace Z length, does impact whether or not a gap action is going to take place. So you can use this to fine tune, how you want it to assess your terrain and things like that, and how, like what is constituting of a gap to be able to start taking any one of these actions. So now that we've got kind of the idea of how to be able to modify the gap actions to get them in place, let's start adding in these last few actions. So the drop to falling, we'll do this one next because this is kind of like the one of the easiest ones. And if I go into my montages here, or my animations, I should say, we got a drop to ledge, which is not the right one. We want the monkey drop. So this one right here. So you're going to see it kind of grabs onto the ledge and kind of just goes downwards. So we're going to go ahead and just right click, create in a montage, and then we'll double click, open it up. Now, just like before, the frontal ledge is warp 4. So we're going to go ahead and just right click, add notify state, motion warping, and we're going to look at where he gets to that, like he's going to be, aligned with the ledge position, and we'll say right about there seems good. Warp target name of warp 4, ignore Z axis uncheck, and then we're going to look at when he kind of gets into a nice position in his drop. Right about there looks good, and we're going to add notify, and then reset parkour action. Now, because we are looking to enter into a fall state, we're just going to leave that as true, and then we're going to hit save. So now what we can do is we can literally just go ahead and add this into our character blueprint now for the third person. So we'll go ahead and just take this and select it in our content browser. Then the drop to falling, we'll select right there. And then we'll compile and save. Now from here, we can just go ahead and right click. We'll play from here. And now we should be able to get a drop. We have to enable the action. So go into the dynamic parkour trace system real quick. And then we're going to go to the ground action settings, gap actions, and drop to falling. Right there, true. And we're just going to make sure to also turn off the override, motion warp, and output settings here. So we'll compile and save one more time. All right. And if I go ahead and I just click on play from here, and because of the way that we have the modifier set up, I'm going to have to use the shift key. But if I use the shift and C, you can see that it goes and does the drop type action. So now we have the drop action being played by our system. So the next thing we're going to do is go into our third-person blueprints, BP third-person character, and we're going to take a look at the drop to ledge animation. So this one is another one of those, like, not every pack has these, but a lot of them do, so it's enough packs have it that I wanted to make sure to allow it into the system. So if we go into the tutorial assets folder here, animations, so it's going to look kind of something like this. Basically, just anything that kind of starts at one point and then will attach itself to a ledge at the end. Preferably kind of like like if I turn root motion off, this will probably make it a little easier to see what's going on. But if I go and do this, you can see he's kind of just like forward, twist, and then catch. So that's essentially all that's happening. So what we'll do is we're going to right click, create in a montage, and we're going to double click and open this up. Now, I will say that this one can be a little trickier to be able to set up, because ultimately what I recommend doing is don't necessarily use any warp points until right about here, where he's kind of facing downwards if you're using something where he twists and then changes his rotation. The reason being is because it can actually cause a bit of an issue with rotation, because of the way that the anim warping is going to actually, or motion warping is going to try to adjust the rotation of the actor to be able to match the rotation that he's supposed to be facing. Because the root motion is not going to match this, it's going to cause some weird issues. So the best thing to do is wait until he's facing the direction or within a reasonable facing direction of where you want to be, and then we're going to add notify state motion warping. And we're going to look at where he attaches to the ledge, which is I'd say right about here. So we're just going to go ahead and put the end of the motion warping window right there. Now for the drop to ledge action, we're just going to go warp target name, warp 4. And we're going to uncheck the ignore Z axes, keep warp rotation checked, and click save. Now we also need to make sure that we go to the track, add notifies track, right click, add notify, and set the climbing, because we want to make sure that we're telling the system, hey, we're also setting climbing from here. So now if we go into the content, third person, blueprints, BP third person character, and we'll just grab this and we're going to put it right into the drop to ledge section here. Now we also need to make sure to enable the action. So we're going to take the drop down to ledge, set it to true, and compile and save. And what we'll do is we'll play it from right here. Now, as I had said, if I hit hold the sprint key and hit C, it'll do the drop down. However, if I don't press the sprint key, it will now do the attach to ledge. So you can see how he kind of attaches himself in. Now, because of the way the rotation is, we should probably adjust that a little bit, make it so that way it's more lined up to when he's going to be at his end. So we'll push it a few frames forward here, something like this, and then we'll save. And we'll just go ahead and play from here. And there we go. Now we have him attaching to the ledge. Now we could modify, the warp position just a little bit, or change the offset in the, offsets menu there. But ultimately we've got the character attaching and being able to drop. And as I always say, when it comes to the motion warping windows and the offsets and stuff, it's all about your animations. Now, when it comes to the other actions here on the gap action types, one thing to point out is that, first of all, the jump to ledge action here, we're going to be covering when we do the climbing video, because this is actually sort of like a climbing assist action, specifically for climb points. So this is not something you're going to be able to use until you know how to be able to use the climb points. And the jump off ledge into free fall action, you can realistically use whatever you want. This is kind of just like a section where I provided a triggerable action based off of if you're sprinting, you hit the space bar, and there's a ledge. So you can use this to be able to trigger like front flips or other sorts of elements. Now, but one thing I just do want to note though is if we go into the parkour system here, I'm going to go ahead and enable that action there, but I'm going to make sure to override the output settings here. So we'll compile, and then I'm going to go to the edge here and play from here. Now, if I go and I hit sprint and I hit the space bar, you can see that we do get the point there, the red sphere. So you do have warp 4 that you can use as the available point. But one thing to keep in mind is that when you use warp 4, that's all you have. So you're just going to use like how we've done in other free fall type of actions, where you're going to use that point to get him to get to the edge, and then use whatever the root motion of the animation is to take over from there. Now, I don't personally have any good front flip animations to be able to show you an example outside of I could throw in, kind of anything else, but it's really not going to look as good. But again, it's just, just like how everything else we've done, it's just kind of putting something in there. And hopefully I'll be able to find a good front flip animation that I can throw in there. And this way we can make sure that we're actually setting up every single action. So that's really it, guys. To be able to set up the drop actions and stuff, we can go ahead and now if we play from here, you can see that we got the ability to now attach to the ledge that way. We can go ahead and, jump off and kind of go off the edge there. We can now dive through windows here like this. We can climb up to things. We've got a lot of different options now for actions that we can do. And in the next video, we're going to be taking a look at climbing finally. So I hope you guys are excited. I've been waiting for this video because the climbing is so much fun. So we're going to be talking about climbing in the next video, as well as a bunch of other things related to climbing. So it's going to really kind of end it for the ground action section of the series. But as always, if you guys have any questions, issues, things that you are encountering and can't figure out, please feel free to hit me up on the Discord or in the YouTube comments. I try to respond and monitor as often as possible. But I hope to see you guys in the climbing video. But until then, stay tuned, and as always, stay animated.